Nightly Auditor's News Report is coming to you live from Bozeman, Montana. I'm Derek.
And I'm Zach. Grizzly sightings around the Bozeman area are on the rise. Residents are advised to remain cautious as a dark tint of maroon is slowly emitting through the air.
There are also more storms in the forecast as skiers prepare for the season. We'll discuss that in our weather segment later on.
I'm getting some breaking news from our producer. Our lead story tonight is out of General Electric. Reports are showing financial statement manipulation, jeopardizing the integrity of the industry giant. More on that later.
Before we get into that big story, let's throw it to Jordan for the weather.
Good evening. Bozeman's forecast for the week shows a cold temperature, but GE's financial forecast shows heavy chances of fraud. GE reportedly used multiple methods to manipulate financials, such as manipulating revenue recognitions, misclassifying expenses, and underreporting reserves and liabilities. Starting out with stormy revenue recognition, GE Power Division and accelerated revenues for long-term service agreements, recognizing full contract revenue upfront instead of following the percentage of completion method required under the ASC 606. Here's what GE did wrong. They prematurely recorded the unearned revenue to give a false sense of profit by accelerating revenue recognition. Here's what they should have done. They should have credited the unearned portion of the deferred revenue, and then once the deferred revenue is earned, debit deferred revenue and credit revenue should be debited. This premature recognition of revenue misrepresented GE's financial position, inflating net incomes, earning per share, and the financial stability. Next up, I'd like to discuss insurance reserve manipulation. GE underreported liabilities related to workers' compensation, health insurance, and general liability claims, reducing its insurance expense and inflating net income. Here's what they did wrong. They understated the insurance expense, which decreases their liabilities and increased reported profits. Here's what they should have done. They should have stated the proper amount in both debit and credit accounts. This manipulation created a misleading image of financial strength, artificially inflating stock prices, and generating favorable short-term sentiment. Lastly, I'd like to talk about underreporting liabilities related to the pension obligations. GE underreported in pension liabilities, particularly the project benefit obligation, PBO, reducing pension-related expenses and liabilities on the balance sheet. Here's what they did wrong. The previous incorrect journal entry, General Electric understated the pension expense and their pension liability to show stronger financial health and higher profits. Here's what they should have done. They should have recorded their journal entry with the correct amount. GE's underreporting pension liabilities, false impression of a more robust financial position, and inflated profitability. That's all for the weather. Stay warm out there, Bozeman. Let's get back to Zach and Derek in the studio.
Thanks, Jordan. I don't think any of us saw that much fraud in the forecast. We'll be sure to bundle up.
We're hearing more about GE's motivations for its financial misstatements. It sounds like its goals are to meet market expectations, secure favorable financing, and protect executive compensation.
GE's executives inflated revenues and suppressed expenses to meet earnings forecasts, preserving their stock value and maintaining investor confidence, all while avoiding market backlash.
By manipulating these earnings, GE was able to secure favorable financing and avoid high borrowing costs. This gave the illusion of strong financial health.
The company's executives, including its CEO, personally benefited from this fraud. The inflated earnings led to higher bonuses as their compensation was linked to the financial performance of the company.
General Electric also violated specific standards set by the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board, commonly known as the PCAOB, which went undetected by the auditors. The first standard to be violated is AS 2110 for risk assessment, which shows that the auditors failed to assess the risks related to General Electric's revenue recognition and reserves.
The next key standard they failed to detect was AS 2301 for audit responses. The auditors failed to perform adequate substantive procedures to test General Electric's revenue and reserve accounts. Lastly, the auditors failed to detect AS 2401 for fraud consideration. They did not investigate fraud indicators such as unusual journal entries or management pressure to meet these extremely high earning targets.
And next, we're going to Oscar, where he's going to go in-depth on sports.
Hey, that's right, Zach. We are preparing for the Brawl of the Wild, where the local Bobcats will face the University of Montana Grizzlies, with MSU hoping to go 12-0 and obtain home field advantage for the playoffs. The Bobcats need to count on their fantastic running game to keep them moving forward. U of M's head coach, Bobby Hawk, has been failing at the helm with his 2-quarterback system and will most likely lose this sold-out game this weekend. Speaking of failures, it's absolutely absurd that the auditors didn't do the following in their audit failures. They should have conducted detailed cutoff testing to verify the timing of revenue recognition, independently reviewed actuarial assumptions related to reserves for long-term insurance liabilities, performed journal entry testing for unusual adjustments such as significant debits to reserves or unusual deferrals, and analyzed management incentives, identifying motives for financial misstatements. If I were KPMG, I would have strengthened the existing auditing standards to prevent future manipulations. My key recommendations would be to include AS 2401, fraud consideration, incorporate a forensic audit framework for high-risk companies. This framework should mandate the use of advanced data analytics and the investigation of journal entries for fraud indicators. AS 2110, risk assessment, required auditors to independently gather industry benchmarks and apply them when evaluating reserves and liabilities, ensuring consistency and objectivity. AS 2301, audit responses, establish mandatory revenue recognition procedures, including third-party confirmations for significant contracts and performance obligations. And finally, AS 1215, audit documentation. Enhance documentation requirements to include justifications for not pursuing red flags identified during risk assessment, which would improve accountability and transparency at GE. What kind of Brawl of the Wild would it be without a little bit of drama? Back to you, Zach.
Thanks for that, Oscar. Big week ahead for the Cats and General Electric. General Electric's financial statement manipulation exemplifies the catastrophic impact of inadequate financial reporting and auditing practices. GE misled stakeholders and damaged trust by deferring expenses, prematurely recognizing revenue, and understating liabilities. Auditors failed to detect these manipulations due to lapses in risk assessment, substantive testing, and professional skepticism. Once these manipulations were revealed, GE had to make significant restatements of its financials and face an investigation by the SEC.
Implementing proposed changes to PCAOB standards would strengthen auditing practices and reduce the likelihood of future financial statement manipulations. Enhanced fraud detection protocols, mandatory industry benchmarking, and improved documentation requirements are critical to fostering financial transparency and restoring investor confidence.
This has been the Nightly Auditors News Report. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you all soon.